piggybacking off of what you were talking about in terms of investing, I kind of just wanted to get to know more about you and your background and how you got started with trading and investing. I know you're, a big seven-figure trader now, but I mean, obviously, it wasn't always like that. So, kind of walk us through your journey and how you
Yeah.
got to today.
Well, thank you for asking. And I'm going to share just some highlights that stand out to me. We were just talking about this off camera a moment ago that I have a unique family background in this way that my mom and my dad were actually ministers in the hood, you could say. I grew up in Gary, Indiana. Now, I was just telling you about Gary because Gary's not in the news today. But when I was a kid growing up in Gary, it actually was the murder capital of the United States. And so now what's interesting about this is that my mother's parents were millionaires. They were very successful people, and they lived on the beaches of Hawaii in an exclusive, gated community. Their neighbor 3 houses down on the beach was Oprah Winfrey. And then their neighbor to the left of them was the Golden Coin. And the neighbor the neighbor to the left owned the Golden Coin in Vegas. And the neighbor to the right was a Japanese billionaire. The old Japanese billionaire, when he was in his 80s, he taught me and my brother how to surf on the beach. And we were mostly told to leave him alone, but we made friends with him and he showed us how to surf. And so I had this strange exposure in my childhood of, I would say, on one hand, some extreme poverty, right? And on the other hand, some extreme wealth. And I kind of went back and forth between these two worlds. And so the poverty part produced in me a strong sense of hunger. Like I'm hungry. I want something more. When I was a kid, my parents had some humble means as ministers. The kids around me, had Jordans and designer clothes, and I just didn't have anything. So yet somehow on this, I would go and spend the summers in Hawaii, and we were treated like kings. Then I would go home, and we were treated like paupers. And so out of all of this, produced a pretty hungry young man. And one of my uncles was actually very successful. He was the president of one of the largest hospitals in the U.S. in Erie, Pennsylvania. And he actually went on to be part of a 4-man team that merged Blue Cross Blue Shield. When he merged those two companies, they gave him a multi-million-dollar bonus. And around that time, I was in my early 20s. And he would come into town where I lived, and he would say, "Hey, Josh, coming into town, you want to get lunch?" And I'd like, "Yeah, uncle." And we'd sit down. And back then, the way that you learned about stocks was through the newspaper. So there's no cell phones. No cell phones. Really, laptops aren't very popular. You got a desktop at your office. You have the newspaper. And you called, and we would sit down for lunch. He'd have the newspaper. He'd pull it out, right? And he would start talking to me about his plays. He would take me to the back of the newspaper, and there would be all the tickers, really small. And to the right of him would be the amount of money and the percentage that it went up. And he was telling me about, how this or that was performing and how he was up 100% or 200% in this. And I rode through the .com bubble with him, kind of like vicariously asking him about his plays and him sharing his successes with me. That's where the spark was laid down, because I'll be honest, Miles, the idea of me being a Wall Street investment guy from where I came from was a pretty big leap. Like it did not seem like it was for me. Nobody had invited me to the table. Nobody around me had said, "Josh, you could do this," right?
Did you want to, though? Is that something that you were interested in, or you wanted to do more?
I mean, none of this is scripted, so I'm going in hardcore with the truth. My mother was a very beautifully religious woman, and I myself love the Lord, but she spoke over all of her kids, 7 kids. She spoke over all of them that they were going to serve the Lord and be in ministry. And I remember going to visit my grandpa and just understanding the wealth and lifestyle that he had. And my mom would tell me that I was going to be in ministry. And I thought, I don't know, Mom, I might need to go run Grandpa's stores in the future. And so there was this little bit of a torn nature, right? Now, I think that has found its peace over the course of my life, because I do spend a lot of time mentoring young people. I have a lot of adopted sons and adopted daughters, and that's how I've chosen to help people in their life. But the other side of me just began to continue to peek over that wall into that world, that other world of wealth that was interest. And I had to wrestle with whether it was even for me to go over there, whether it was for me to conquer it. Well, eventually, in the course of time, and I would love to tell you that, like everybody else, I got a regular 9 to 5 job, and I tucked away a little bit of investment money and slowly conquered Wall Street. No, that wasn't my experience. That would be very cool. No, I
Yeah.
actually I got a nice fat inheritance eventually in the course of time when my beloved grandparents passed away. I got a nice chunk of change one day. And at that time, my friend from church, Larry Jones, Stock Up with Larry Jones,
Okay.
he had been doing some dabbling, and he had a friend, James Hatchett, and James knew options. And I kept asking Larry, what do you know about options, man? I got to crack into this options game. This is where it's at. Because I had at that time been hearing about people making big money. James, I reached out to him, and he said, yeah, man, come by the house. And we spent a couple hours, and every once in a while I would ask him some questions. And right off the bat, I started making big plays. I was trading with $500,000 and making $20,000-$40,000 a play was happening, right? And the
Wait,
very
wait,
first,
wait. Wait, so when you first started trading, your position sizes was like $500,000?
I would have, yeah, $500,000 at play on
Wow.
plays. Yeah. And I can tell you that was a big degree of foolishness. I actually was pretty gifted at it. I think I was naturally gifted. I think I'm naturally gifted at charts. I am a very visual person, very pattern oriented. And it's not to say that I didn't have to spend a ton of time learning, because I did, but but I put a ton of effort in, but I also was somewhat good at it. So my first year, I went full-time day trading after I'd gotten that inheritance, and I made $120,000 that first year. But I put in an inordinate amount of hours. Like, I want you guys, those people out here, to hear, I was what you call obsessed. When I tell you I was obsessed, I'm talking I was up at 4 a.m. and I was on my computer until midnight. And I'm talking like pretty much 7 days a week. I was researching, studying, and I got into sort of an unhealthy place. And I had two big losses back to back. So I had my
Okay.
120,000 that I had accumulated over 12 months. And then within a very short amount of time, I lost 60K.
Oh,
And
wow.
at that particular moment, it was just a massive setback, because it wasn't the money, and it wasn't the feeling that I couldn't make more money. It was
Like
the
it kind of did something to you, kind of like mentally, in a sense.
it did.
Yep.
And I basically felt like I lost 6 months of my life. And the amount of time that I had put into trading those 6 months it was like demoralizing. And I really lost my momentum. And I took a step back, and my wife had said to me, Joshua, why don't you slow down your trading and start trading more part-time in a more focused effort with less risk? And at that point, I had a business idea that I'd wanted to pursue. And so I actually didn't want to pursue it, Miles. I didn't want to.
Wow.
And but my wife was kind of encouraging me. She said, you wanted to pursue that thing. Why don't you go do it? And out to placate her, because really secretly I wanted to be 24/7 obsessed with the market.
Yeah.
I was like a market crackhead. Secretly, I wanted to do that, but I placated her and I said, okay, well, I'll go out and I'll talk to some guys about this business. I really wasn't interested in it. Like, I was very low interest. Well, I went out that day, and I went to go talk to a guy about doing this product for him. And he kind of like said, yes, let's do it full bore. And I was like, oh, okay, great. And so it backfired, because I would say that there was favor on it. And then that business began to kind of grow and thrive. And I put trading a little bit on the back burner. I continued to
Right.
swing trade and continued to research, but I took much lower risks. And that's kind of my journey.